The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was replacing a rotted board on the dock. Dad, great news. We're moving into the Lakehouse tomorrow. You should probably head back to your apartment tonight. My name is Gerald Matthews. I'm 64 years old, recently retired after 42 years as a wildlife biologist for the state of Minnesota. 3 months ago, I purchased a small cottage on Lake Vermilion, 2 hours north of Duluth. 900 square feet of solitude, surrounded by wetlands, old-growth forest, and some of the finest walleye fishing in the state. The voice on the phone belonged to Brett, my daughter Amy's husband. He was 33, worked in marketing, and had visited the lake house exactly once, for 3 hours, on a sunny afternoon in June. Brett, what are you talking about? Amy and I discussed it. The lake house is perfect for the kids. Fresh air, nature, room to run around. You don't need all that space anyway. I bought this house 3 months ago. For my retirement. Right, but you're retired now. You can retire anywhere. We have careers, kids, and activities. We need the house more than you do. I looked out at the lake. A great blue heron stood in the shallow water, perfectly still, waiting for prey. The afternoon sun made the surface shimmer like hammered copper. This view, this peace, this connection to the natural world I'd studied my entire career. This was everything I'd worked for. Brett, you can't just move into my house. We already gave notice on our rental. Movers are coming tomorrow morning. Amy's packing right now. The kids are so excited. We'll take good care of the place, don't worry. I'm not worried. I'm telling you no. Dad. That was Amy, taking the phone. Dad, please don't make this difficult. You know how cramped we are in the duplex. Maddie and Connor are sharing a bedroom. Brett's working from home now. We need space. Then find space. This is my home. You have the apartment in Duluth. A perfectly good 2-bedroom apartment. Why do you need a lake house too? Because I earned it. Because I spent 4 decades studying ecosystems and barely making enough to survive. Because your mother and I always dreamed of retiring to a lake, and now that she's gone, this is how I honor that dream. My wife, Linda, had died 2 years ago. Cancer, swift, and merciless. We'd planned to buy a lake house together to spend our retirement fishing and watching wildlife. She never got to see it. Mom would want you to share with family, Amy said. I closed my eyes, using Linda's memory as a weapon. That was new. Your mother would want you to respect my boundaries and make your own way in the world. Fine. Be selfish. But we're coming tomorrow anyway. You can either be there to help us settle in, or you can sulk in your apartment. Your choice. She hung up. I sat on the dock for a long time, watching the heron. It struck suddenly, coming up with a small fish and swallowing it whole. Patient. Strategic. Successful. I made 3 phone calls that evening. First, to my old colleague Marcus, who still worked for the Department of Natural Resources. Marcus, I need information about mosquito breeding patterns around Lake Vermilion. Planning to study them? Planning to educate some people about wetland ecosystems. That sounds ominous. Just educational. Second, to my neighbor Dale, who ran a fishing guide service. Dale, do you still have clients who fish at night for walleye? Sure do. Best fishing's between midnight and 3 a.m. this time of year. How would you feel about concentrating your operations right off my shore for the next few nights? You got a problem with poachers? I have a problem with people who don't understand lake life. Thought some authentic local atmosphere might help them learn. Dale laughed. I can arrange that. Third, to my friend Sarah, a sound engineer who recorded wildlife for nature documentaries. Sarah, do you still have those recordings of spring peeper frogs and northern leopard frogs? Hours of them. Why? I need to borrow your portable speakers, the waterproof ones. Gerald, what are you planning? A comprehensive lesson in wetland ecology. Brett's SUV and a U-Haul truck arrived at 9 a.m. the next morning. I was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, when they pulled up. Amy got out first. "Dad, you're still here?" "It's my house. Where else would I be?" Brett opened the back of the truck. "Look, we don't want this to be awkward. Just grab your personal stuff and head out. We'll take it from here." "I'm not leaving." "Then you're going to watch us move in and be weird about it." "I'm going to sit on my porch and observe. I'm a biologist. Observation is what I do." The kids, Maddie, 7, and Connor, 5, ran immediately toward the lake. "Stop," I called out. "Do not go near that water without an adult." "It's a lake, Dad," Amy said. "Kids swim in lakes." Kids swim in lakes after their parents check for leeches, test the water temperature, identify safe entry points, and understand the ecosystem they're entering. This isn't a swimming pool. Brett rolled his eyes. "Jesus, it's just water." Just water filled with northern pike, snapping turtles, deep drop-offs, submerged logs, and leeches. But sure, let the kids run wild. Amy grabbed both children. "Stay on the shore. Don't go in the water yet." I watched as they unloaded furniture, a king-size bed that barely fit through the doorway, a massive sectional sofa that dominated my small living room, a 65-inch TV that looked absurd against the rustic log walls. "Brett, this place is 900 square feet. Built in 1974 as a fishing cottage. It's not designed for a family of 4 and all your suburban furniture." "We'll make it work," Brett said, grunting as he maneuvered the sofa through the door. By noon, they'd crammed an entire household into a space designed for weekend getaways. The place looked like a storage unit. "Okay, Dad," Amy said. "You've made your point. You think we're making a mistake, but we're here now. Are you going to stay and make everyone miserable, or are you going to give us space to settle in?" I stood up. "I'll give you space. 24 hours worth. Then we'll talk about whether you want to stay." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're about to get a very thorough education in lake living." I drove to my Duluth apartment, but I didn't go inside. Instead, I drove to a hardware store and bought supplies. Then I headed back to the lake, parking a quarter-mile down the road at a public access point. At 4 p.m., I hiked through the woods to the wetland area behind my property. Lake Vermilion's shoreline was heavily vegetated with cattails, wild rice, and sedges. Perfect mosquito habitat. The insects were already thick, but they could be much worse. I'd brought sugar water, organic matter, and several shallow containers. I set up breeding stations in strategic locations around the wetland, creating ideal conditions for mosquito larvae. Within hours, the adult population would explode. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even unnatural. I was simply accelerating a process that occurred every summer, an educational demonstration of wetland ecology. At 7 p.m., Brett called. "Hey, there are a lot of mosquitoes here. Like a lot." "It's a lake surrounded by wetlands in July. That's normal." "Normal? I've gotten 15 bites in 10 minutes. Did you bring insect repellent?" Silence. "Brett, this is northern Minnesota. Mosquitoes are the unofficial state bird. You don't go outside without repellent. It's in the information binder I left on the kitchen counter." "What information binder?" "Blue 3-ring binder labeled Lakehouse Essential Information. It has sections on local wildlife, seasonal conditions, safety protocols, and recommended supplies." I didn't see any binder. "Probably buried under all the furniture you crammed in there." He hung up. At 8:30 p.m., I positioned Sarah's waterproof speakers in the wetland vegetation. The recordings were crystal clear. Spring peeper frogs, northern leopard frogs, American toads, and green frogs. I'd also included loon calls, which were naturally eerie, and grape-horned owls for atmosphere. I set the system to start at 10 p.m. and cycle through various calls all night long. At 9 p.m., I called Dale. The family's settled in. You're clear to bring your fishing clients to the usual spots. How many boats you want? However many you've got. Make it feel like a popular fishing area, because it is. You're diabolical, Gerald. I'm educational. At 9:45 p.m., from my position in the woods, I watched Brett and Amy trying to get the kids to bed. Through the windows, I could see them swatting at mosquitoes. They'd opened the windows for airflow. The cottage had no air conditioning, just fans, and the screens were old, with gaps. At 10 p.m., the speakers activated. The sound of hundreds of frogs filled the air, a deafening chorus that was completely natural for the ecosystem, but apparently shocking to people who'd never spent a night in actual wilderness. The cottage lights came back on. I could see Brett and Amy standing in the living room, looking confused and alarmed. At 10:15 p.m., Amy called. "Dad, what is that noise?" "What noise?" "It sounds like thousands of frogs. And weird bird calls. It's so loud we can't sleep." "Those are spring peepers and leopard frogs. Very common in wetland environments. Plus, some loons and owls. That's the symphony of lake life. Can you make it stop?" "Can I make nature stop?" "No, Amy. That's not how ecosystems work. This is insane. How did you sleep with this noise?" "I find it soothing. Then again, I spent 40 years studying these exact species. You learn to appreciate their ecological importance. The kids are scared. The kids are learning about biodiversity, educational opportunity." At 11:30 p.m., the first fishing boat arrived. Dale had outdone himself. He'd brought 4 boats, all with bright spotlights, all running trolling motors that made distinctive whining sounds as they moved slowly along the shoreline. Brett called at 11:47 p.m. "There are boats right outside. Shining lights in our windows. Those are walleye fishermen. Lake Vermilion is famous for walleye. Night fishing is most productive." "At midnight?" "Who fishes at midnight?" "Serious anglers. Walleye feed most actively in low light. This is prime fishing time." "Can you tell them to go somewhere else?" "Tell them?" "Brett, this is a public lake. They have every right to fish here. This is one of the best walleye spots on Vermilion." "How long does this go on?" "Usually until 2 or 3 and sometimes later if the bite is good." I could hear Amy in the background. This place is a nightmare. At 1:15 a.m., Connor started crying. The combination of mosquito bites, frog sounds, owl calls, and fishing boat lights had overwhelmed the 5-year-old's ability to sleep. At 2:30 a.m., Maddie joined in. At 3:45 a.m., Brett called again. "We're leaving. We can't take this anymore." "Leaving? You just moved in. Your lake house is uninhabitable. Mosquitoes everywhere, constant noise, boats shining lights all night. This place is hell. This place is a functioning northern Minnesota lake ecosystem. Everything you're experiencing is normal." "Normal? How did you stand it?" "Preparation, Brett. Mosquito netting, white noise machines, blackout curtains, and most importantly, realistic expectations about what lake living actually means. You set this up. The frogs, the boats, all of it. I did nothing but let nature take its course. The frogs live here. The mosquitoes breed in the wetlands every summer. The fishermen come to this spot because it's productive. This is reality. We're done. We'll be out by morning." That's probably wise. I walked back to my truck and drove to a 24-hour diner in Tower. Ordered coffee and pie. Waited. At 6:30 a.m., I returned to the Lakehouse. The U-Haul was already packed, though haphazardly. Brett looked like he hadn't slept at all. Amy had mosquito bites covering her arms and legs. Both kids were crying in the SUV. "Happy now?" Amy asked bitterly. "Not particularly. I'm sorry you had a miserable night. You did this on purpose." I did nothing except own property in an ecosystem you didn't bother to research. Everything you experienced last night happens naturally. The only difference is that I know how to prepare for it. Brett was loading the last boxes. This place is unlivable. This place is perfectly livable for someone who understands lake ecosystems and takes appropriate precautions. But it's not a suburban house that happens to have water nearby. It's a cottage embedded in functioning wilderness. Why didn't you warn us? Amy asked. I tried. You hung up on me. I left an information binder with everything you needed to know. You buried it under your furniture. I went inside and found the binder under a couch cushion. Held it up. Section 3 covers mosquito prevention. Section 5 covers local wildlife sounds. Section 7 covers fishing activity patterns. Everything you needed to know was right here. Britt snatched the binder. This is insane. Who needs an instruction manual to live in a house? Anyone living in the wilderness needs to understand that environment. You wouldn't move to the desert without learning about heat management. You wouldn't move to the mountains without learning about elevation. Why would you move to a lake without learning about wetland ecosystems? Because it's just a lake house. No, Brett. It's a cottage in a complex ecosystem that includes wetlands, forests, and a large body of water. That ecosystem has mosquitoes, frogs, owls, loons, fish, leeches, snapping turtles, and occasionally bears. If you don't understand and respect that ecosystem, you're going to have a bad time. Amy was crying now. We gave up our rental. We told everyone we were moving to the lake. Now we have nowhere to go. Your old landlord called me yesterday. I asked him to hold your unit for 3 days. He agreed. It's still available if you want it. Amy's eyes widened. You knew we'd fail. I knew you were unprepared. I hoped you'd learn before making a terrible mistake. The U-Haul pulled away at 7:15 a.m., followed by Brett's SUV. I watched them go, then walked down to the water. The heron was back, standing in the shallows. The frog sounds had naturally quieted with daybreak. The fishing boats were gone. The mosquitoes were manageable in the morning breeze. I spent the day restoring the cottage to its proper state, removing the oversized furniture they'd abandoned, hanging the blackout curtains they'd never found, setting up the mosquito netting and white noise machines, and organizing the space for what it was meant to be, a simple retreat for someone who understood and respected the environment. At 4 p.m., I removed the mosquito breeding stations I'd set up, dismantled the speaker system, and called Dale to thank him for his help. Did they learn anything? Dale asked. They learned that assumptions are expensive. Whether they learn the deeper lesson remains to be seen. That evening, I sat on the dock with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The heron was fishing again. A loon called from across the lake. Frogs were beginning their evening chorus. This was the life I'd worked for, the peace I'd earned, and I protected it by simply letting nature be herself. Amy called 3 days later. We took the old rental. Same duplex. Same cramped space. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Are you? You orchestrated the whole thing. Amy, be honest. Could you have lasted even a week at the Lakehouse? Really? Silence. The mosquitoes are always bad in July. The frogs always call at night. The fishing boats always come to that spot because it's productive. I didn't create those conditions. I just didn't prevent you from experiencing them. You could have helped us prepare. I tried. You announced you were taking my house without permission, hung up when I objected, and ignored the informational resources I'd prepared. How exactly should I have helped? You could have given us a chance. I did. Nature gave you a chance. You failed because you were unprepared, entitled, and unwilling to research what you were getting into. Brett wants nothing to do with you. That's his choice. But Amy, let me ask you something. Did you even want to move to the lake? Or was this Brett's idea? A long pause. Brett wanted it. He had this vision of lake life from visiting that one perfect afternoon. I tried to tell him it might be different, but he was so excited. And you went along. I always go along. It's easier than fighting. How's that working out for you? She started crying. I'm exhausted, Dad. Brett makes these big decisions, and I just follow. The Lakehouse. The car we couldn't afford. The private school for Maddie that's destroying our budget. I never say no. Maybe it's time to start. He'll be furious. He'll adjust. The question is whether you can live with yourself if you keep surrendering your voice just to keep the peace. We talked for an hour, really talked, for the first time in years. About her marriage, her choices, her fears. I'm sorry we tried to take your house, she said finally. I'm sorry you married someone who thought he could. Can I visit sometime? Just me and the kids. Learn about the lake properly? I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Amy brought Maddie and Connor for a weekend. Just them, no Brett. He was too busy with work, which everyone knew meant he was sulking. I taught the kids about lake ecology, how to identify animal tracks, where the leeches lived and how to avoid them, the difference between spring peepers and leopard frogs, how to recognize safe swimming areas. Grandpa, why are there so many mosquitoes? Connor asked, swatting at his arm. Because wetlands are mosquito breeding habitats. But look at what eats the mosquitoes: bats, dragonflies, birds. The mosquitoes are annoying to us, but they're an important food source for other animals. Everything's connected, Maddie said. Exactly. That's what an ecosystem is. Everything connected, everything dependent on everything else. We fished from the dock. Maddie caught a small bluegill and shrieked with delight. Connor was convinced he saw a snapping turtle, though it was probably a painted turtle. In the evenings, I played the frog recordings at reasonable volumes, teaching them to identify different species by sound. We watched the fishing boats and talked about why night fishing worked. When Brett and I were here, he said the frogs were attacking us, Connor said. Frogs don't attack people. They're tiny amphibians calling for mates. They're not even aware we exist. Brett said everything here was trying to kill us. Amy looked embarrassed. He was tired and scared. The lake was different from what he expected. The lake was exactly what it is, I said. Brett expected something it never claimed to be. On Sunday evening, as they were loading the car to leave, Amy hugged me. Thank you for this weekend. The kids learned so much. They learned because they were willing to listen and observe. That's the key to understanding any ecosystem: patience and attention. Brett called me yesterday. Asked when we were coming home. I told him we'd come home when I decided we were ready. How'd he take that? Not well. But I'm done making myself small to manage his feelings. Good. I'm thinking about going back to work. I was a dental hygienist before the kids. There's a practice in Duluth that's hiring. What does Brett think about that? I don't know. I haven't asked him. I'm making this decision myself. She drove away with the kids waving from the back window. I waved back until they disappeared around the bend. A month later, Brett called. Not Amy, Brett. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. For what? For trying to take your house. For assuming I could just move in. For being a dick about the whole thing. That's quite an admission. Amy's in therapy. She suggested I talk to someone too. My therapist said I have issues with entitlement and boundary violations. Smart therapist. She said I probably learned it from my family. My parents always gave me what I wanted. I never learned that other people's stuff isn't mine just because I want it. That's a hard lesson to learn as an adult. Everything's falling apart, Gerald. Amy got a job without asking me. She's talking about how we need to downsize, sell the car, pull Maddie from private school. She's making all these decisions without me. Or she's making decisions with herself instead of for you. It's the same thing. No, it's not. For years, you made decisions and expected her to follow. Now she's making decisions for herself. That's not about excluding you. It's about including herself. Brett was quiet. I don't know how to fix this. Start by respecting her autonomy. Listen when she talks. Stop assuming your wants trump everyone else's needs. I really thought the lake house would solve our problems. Give us space, a fresh start, all that. Running from problems doesn't solve them. You carry your dysfunctions everywhere you go. Is that from your therapist? That's from 40 years of observing animal behavior. Territorial disputes don't resolve by changing territory. They resolve by changing behavior. You ever screw up this bad? More times than I can count. Ask Amy about the year I missed her birthday because I was tracking wolf populations, or the time I chose a research conference over her high school graduation. I was so focused on my work that I forgot to be present for my family. Linda forgave you. Eventually. But she also held me accountable. Made me understand that my work wasn't more important than the people I loved. That's the gift of a partner who won't let you get away with your worst self. Amy's not letting me get away with anything anymore. Good. That means she respects you enough to demand better. 3 months later, Brett and Amy invited me to dinner at their duplex. It was cramped, but they'd made it work. Maddie's artwork covered the fridge. Connor's toys were organized in bins. It looked like a home. We paid off the car, Brett said over spaghetti. Traded down to something used but reliable. Paid cash. Smart move. Amy's working 3 days a week. We're using the income to build an emergency fund. Even smarter. Amy smiled. Brett's been reading about financial planning, following some of the same principles you used to save for the lake house. Long-term thinking. Delayed gratification. Living below your means. It's boring as hell, Brett said, but it's working. After dinner, while Amy put the kids to bed, Brett and I sat on the small balcony. I want to understand something, he said. That night at the lake, the mosquitoes, the frogs, the fishing boats. How much of that was natural and how much did you orchestrate? I considered lying, then decided against it. The frogs were recorded and amplified. I enhanced the mosquito population. I arranged for concentrated fishing activity. So you did sabotage us. I accelerated natural conditions you would have encountered anyway. Everything I did happens regularly at that lake. You would have faced those same challenges eventually. I just compressed the timeline. Why? Because you needed to learn quickly that assumptions have consequences. That taking what isn't yours comes with costs. That researching before acting matters. You could have just said no and called the police. I could have. But that wouldn't have taught you anything except that I was willing to escalate. This way, nature taught the lesson. Hard to argue with reality. Brett laughed despite himself. You're a devious old man. I'm a biologist who understands that environmental consequences teach better than lectures. Would you be willing to teach me? About the lake, the ecosystem, how to actually visit properly. You want to come back. Not to live, but maybe to visit. Learn what I should have learned the first time. Show the kids what Amy showed them. I'd like that. 6 months after the disastrous move-in attempt, Brett and his family came to the lake house for a weekend. This time, they brought mosquito repellent, realistic expectations, and genuine curiosity. I taught Brett about walleye patterns, reading water conditions, and the delicate balance of wetland ecosystems. He asked good questions, listened to answers, admitted what he didn't know. I was such an idiot, he said while we fished at dawn. Thought I could just show up and dominate nature like it was a spreadsheet. Nature doesn't care about your marketing skills or confidence. It just is. You adapt to it, or you suffer. I'm learning that about a lot of things, my marriage, my finances, my life. That's called growth. It's exhausting. Growing usually is. We caught 4 walleye that morning. Brett cleaned them himself, learning the proper technique. No rushing, no shortcuts. That evening, sitting on the dock at sunset, Brett said something unexpected. Thank you for not enabling me. What do you mean? You could have let me move in. Taken the money I would have paid you in rent. Let me fail slowly over months while destroying your peace. Instead, you forced a reckoning in one night. Some lessons need to be sharp and immediate. Amy's therapist said the same thing, that the people who love us sometimes have to let us experience consequences. The heron appeared, landing gracefully in the shallows. We watched it hunt in comfortable silence. I come here to remember that I'm small, I said eventually. That ecosystems existed long before me and will exist long after. That my wants and needs don't reshape reality. That's what you were trying to teach me. That's what the lake taught you. I just removed the barriers preventing the lesson. A year after Brett's failed takeover, I sat on my dock on a September evening, watching geese fly south in perfect formation. The air was crisp, the water calm, the mosquitoes finally gone with the first frost. My phone buzzed with a photo from Amy, Maddie holding a bluegill, beaming with pride. The text read, "First fish of the trip." She remembered everything you taught her. They were visiting Brett's parents in Wisconsin, fishing from a rented cabin. Brett had researched the lake, checked the regulations, brought proper equipment, and set realistic expectations. The cottage behind me was exactly as I wanted it, simple, peaceful, embedded in wilderness. The great blue heron visited daily. The loons called each evening. The frogs sang their seasonal symphonies. This was what I'd earned, what I'd protected, what I'd refused to surrender to entitlement and assumption. Nature had been my ally in that protection. The mosquitoes, the frogs, the fishing boats, all tools that taught what words couldn't. Some people learn from lectures. Others need to experience consequences. Brett had been the latter, and nature had been his teacher. The geese continued their journey south, following ancient patterns older than human civilization. The lake reflected the sunset, gold, orange, and purple. Tomorrow, I'd fish, read, watch the heron, live the life I'd spent 4 decades building. And somewhere, a family was learning to approach nature with respect instead of entitlement, to research before acting, to understand that the world doesn't rearrange itself around human wants. That was worth one uncomfortable night. Worth the confrontation and the conflict. Worth protecting what mattered. The lake rolled on, patient and eternal, teaching its lessons to anyone willing to listen. I'd listened my whole life, built my retirement around those lessons, and used them to protect what I'd earned. Nature doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise, doesn't care about your plans or expectations. It just is. And sometimes that's exactly the lesson people need to learn.